Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our show. We always say it, but it's true. Our deep dives are really inspired by you, our amazing listeners.
You give us the topics, and we kind of geek out, go deep, and hopefully bring back some seriously useful insights.
So let's jump right into it. Today, we're tackling this whole idea of ego.
And for this deep dive, we're turning to Ryan Holiday's book, Ego is the Enemy. This was a popular suggestion from a lot of you. Seems like a lot of us are wrestling with how ego, the thing we hear so much about, actually shows up in our lives, messes with our goals.
Totally. So today, our mission, should we choose to accept it, is to really break down what ego is, how it sneaks in at different stages, like when we're just starting out and we've hit some wins, and yeah, even when things totally crash and burn.
And most importantly, we want to give you some practical tools to spot those ego traps and sidestep them.
Exactly. Think of it as your own personal ego decoder ring.
I love that. And we've got some really rich examples from the book to draw on, covering historical figures, athletes, writers, you name it.
We'll see how letting ego run wild has totally derailed people, and then flip side, how keeping it in check has helped others achieve some truly remarkable things.
So ready to take a swing at this.
Born ready. Let's talk ego. First things first, when the book talks about ego, it's not just about arrogance, right? It's a bit deeper than that.
You hit the nail on the head. It goes way beyond just, being a braggart.
Right.
It's more about this unhealthy belief in our own importance, like to an absurd degree.
Yeah, and this can totally disconnect us from, well, reality.
Completely. And you know what? It's that voice in our head that's always like, me, me, me. I deserve all the credit. Even when we've barely put in the work, it's constantly craving validation, applause, the spotlight.
So basically, it's like having this tiny hype man living rent-free in your brain 24/7.
Oh my God, that's the perfect analogy. And the book has this brilliant way of describing this internal battle, Station KFKD K-fucked.
Oh, I love that. Tell me more about that. What is Station KFKD?
So imagine this, okay? One speaker is constantly blasting how amazing, brilliant, special you are. Non-stop self-aggrandizement.
Like a never-ending highlight reel.
Exactly. And then on the other speaker, you have this constant loop of all your screw-ups, failures, insecurities, total self-loathing.
It's like listening to the worst radio station ever.
And that's the thing, right? That constant internal noise, that totally distorted self-image, that's ego in action. And it's not just annoying, it's totally draining. It pulls your focus away from what truly matters.
So how does this ego thing mess us up right from the get-go when we're all fired up, chasing big dreams?
Well, the book warns us about getting lost in our own heads.
Right.
Like seriously lost, like feasting on our own thoughts, as Plato put it.
Oh, interesting.
You get so caught up in fantasizing about success, picturing yourself hitting those goals, that you actually forget to do the real work that makes it happen.
It's like living in a daydream instead of actually, putting in the elbow grease.
Exactly. It's the classic analysis paralysis. You're so afraid of messing up that you never actually start.
And the book gives us some pretty dramatic examples of this.
Oh, yeah.
Like Civil War General George McClellan.
Oh, McClellan. He's the poster child for this. Brilliant guy on paper, but his ego was the size of, well, the entire Union Army.
Right, he overthought everything.
He was convinced he was this master strategist, which led to constant hesitation, second-guessing. He never wanted to commit, always waiting for the perfect moment, which, of course, never comes in war.
So his ego basically stopped him from seeing the reality of the situation, right?
Totally. It blocked him from taking action, from making tough calls.
And, it's not just historical figures. The book also points out how even seemingly positive things, like visualizing your goals, can backfire.
Oh, that's a good one.
How does that happen?
Well, it turns out our brains can be pretty easily tricked. Research suggests that if you spend too much time visualizing a goal, like really vividly picturing it, your brain can actually mistake that for real progress.
Really?
It's like you get this premature sense of accomplishment, so you're less motivated to put in the real, sometimes really tough work to actually get there.
Makes sense. I mean, who wants to climb a mountain when you can just imagine yourself standing on the peak, right?
Right. And same thing goes for talking about your goals all the time.
Really?
Yeah, verbalizing it over and over again can create this illusion that you've already achieved something, so you're actually less likely to put in the effort.
The book uses Upton Sinclair as an example of this?
Yeah, perfect example. So Sinclair, he was running for governor of California, and he was so sure he was going to win.
Right.
He actually wrote a whole book called, get this, I, Governor of California.
Wow, before the election even happened.
Yep. laid out all his grand plans, what he's going to do, the whole shebang.
Sounds like a classic case of counting your chickens before they hatch.
Exactly. And you know what? He lost big time.
Yeah.
It's like the act of writing the book, putting himself in that role, satisfied some deep ego needs.
So he didn't have the drive to actually campaign and, connect with voters.
The talking replaced the doing.
Yeah.
And that's a trap we can all fall into.
So it doesn't matter if it's running for office or writing a novel, that need for external validation, it can stop us from doing the actual work that matters.
100%.
Okay, so we've seen how ego can mess things up when we're just starting out.
Right.
What about when we actually start to achieve some things, those early wins?
Oh, that's a whole other danger zone.
The book calls it early pride, right?
Yep, early success is a tricky beast. It's easy to let it inflate our ego and trick us into thinking we've somehow made it, that we've got it all figured out.
Yeah.
Which, of course, is never true. We've always got more to learn, more to improve.
The book uses this great quote from Cotton Mather.
Oh, yeah, the one about stooping.
Yes. He warns a young Benjamin Franklin, "Stoop, young man. Stoop as you go through this world, and you'll miss many hard thumps."
It's like pride literally gave Franklin a headache.
Right.
But Mather's point is much deeper than just bumping your head, right? It's about how pride makes us feel superior, so we can't see our own flaws, our limitations.
And that makes us miss opportunities to learn and grow.
Exactly. And it's so easy to fall into that trap.
So even when we're on a roll, it's important to keep that stooping posture. Stay humble.
Absolutely. Recognize that early success is just one step, not the finish line.
Right. It's a marathon, not a sprint.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've covered ego and aspiration and in success.
Right.
Let's talk about what happens when things don't go our way.
The dreaded F word. Failure.
The book has this section called Work, Work, Work.
Oh, I love that section.
What's the link between all that hard work and handling those inevitable setbacks?
Well, the book makes this key distinction between just having ideas and actually putting in the work to bring those ideas to life.
Like anyone can have $1 million idea, but it's the execution that matters.
That's right. It uses this example of Edgar Degas, the famous painter.
Oh, yeah. What about him?
Well, it turns out he was also obsessed with poetry, but he just couldn't get it right.
Oh.
His friend, this poet named Stéphane Mallarmé, was like, "It's not with ideas, my dear Degas, that one makes verse. It's with words."
So basically, he was all talk, no action.
Kind of. He had the inspiration, but he wasn't willing to put in the time, the practice, to actually craft the poems.
And that's where the ego comes in, right? Thinking you're so brilliant that you don't have to do the work.
Totally. And this applies to everything, not just art. Think about athletes, entrepreneurs, anyone who's truly mastered their craft.
They've put in countless hours of practice, right?
Absolutely. It's that dedication, that willingness to push through difficulty that really makes the difference. There's this quote from Bill Bradley that I love. "When you are not practicing, remember, someone somewhere is practicing. And when you meet him, he will win."
That's intense.
But it's true. And that focus on continuous improvement, that's the antidote to ego.
Right, ego is all about shortcuts, instant gratification.
Exactly. It wants the rewards without the effort.
And that brings us to this whole fake it till you make it mentality.
Oh, yeah. The book talks about how hollow that can be.
How so?
Well, it often puts too much emphasis on the faking it part.
Yeah.
It's all about projecting an image of success, even if you don't have the substance to back it up.
So it's like putting on a mask instead of actually doing the work to become that person.
Totally. True mastery comes from putting in the time, developing the skills, learning from your mistakes.
It's about becoming, not pretending.
Exactly. It's like you wouldn't want a surgeon who just faked their way through medical school,
Yeah,
right?
definitely not.
So why would we approach our own goals any differently?
Right. We owe it to ourselves to be the real deal. So in a sense, the act of putting in the work, that's a form of humility in itself.
I love that way of looking at it. True work is often a quiet internal process.
It's about dedication, perseverance, pushing through those tough times. And often, there's no immediate reward or recognition.
It's about the journey, not just the destination.
I like that. Okay, so we've looked at how ego can trip us up in aspiration, in success, and in failure.
Right.
How do we keep a level head through all of that? The book has a great section called Always Stay a Student. What's the takeaway there?
It's about remembering that learning never stops.
Like, no matter how much we achieve.
Exactly. The physicist John Wheeler said it best. As our island of knowledge grows, so does the shore of our ignorance.
Wow, that's pretty deep.
It is, right? The more we learn, the more we realize we don't know.
And it takes a lot of humility to embrace that.
It does.
To always be open to new ideas, to admit when we're wrong.
Exactly. Frank Shamrock, the MMA legend, had this mantra, always stay a student.
I like that.
And it reminds me of the Mongols.
Oh, how so?
Well, they weren't just brutal conquerors, they were also incredibly adaptable.
They were willing to learn from their enemies.
Absolutely. They'd study their tactics, their strategies, and incorporate them into their own.
That's pretty smart.
And it's the opposite of what we often see with people or companies that become successful.
They get stuck in their ways.
Totally. They think they've got it all figured out, and they stop listening, stop learning.
And that's a recipe for disaster.
100%.
The book also warns us about creating these self-serving narratives about our past successes.
Oh, yeah, that's a sneaky one.
How does that hold us back?
Well, our ego loves to rewrite history.
Oh.
It wants to emphasize all our brilliant moves and downplay any mistakes or lucky breaks.
We create this perfect story about ourselves.
Exactly. But it's a lie.
And it makes us resistant to new information, to admitting we're wrong.
Totally. And it stops us from seeing things clearly.
The book uses Bill Walsh as an example of how to avoid this trap.
Oh, yeah, the legendary football coach.
He always emphasized the standard of performance, right?
He did. It was all about consistent execution, sticking to the fundamentals no matter what.
So he didn't get caught up in past glories or buy into the hype?
Nope. He knew that dwelling on the past could lead to complacency, and that's a killer.
So even when we achieve great things, it's important to stay open, stay curious, like a student.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Now, the book gets into some really practical advice for managing ourselves.
Okay, love this part.
One of the key questions it asks is, to be or to do?
Oh, that's a good one. What's that all about?
Well, it's about figuring out what truly motivates us.
Okay.
Choosing to be is often about external validation, status, recognition, all those things that feed the ego.
Right.
But choosing to do is about the work itself, the purpose, making a real contribution.
So it's about focusing on the process, not just the outcome.
Exactly. And our ego is always trying to pull us towards the being seen as successful side of things.
Even if it means sacrificing the work that truly matters.
Right. The book gives us this amazing example of William Tecumseh Sherman.
Oh, yeah. What about him?
So he was offered a higher command during the Civil War, but he turned it down.
Really?
Yeah. He knew he wasn't ready for it.
So he chose competence over ego.
Exactly. He wasn't going to let ambition get in the way of doing what was right.
Wow. That takes a lot of self-awareness.
It does. And it's the opposite of what we see with someone like Napoleon.
Oh, yeah. He was all about that immediate glory.
And that's a dangerous path.
So it all comes down to honest self-assessment, right?
Right.
Knowing our strengths and our limitations.
Totally. The book makes this great point that the pretense of knowledge is our most dangerous vice.
It's true. When our ego tricks us into thinking we know more than we do, it stops us from learning and growing.
We're afraid to ask for help, to admit we're wrong.
Exactly. And that's a recipe for stagnation.
So we need to cultivate that habit of self-reflection.
100%.
Yeah.
Honestly, evaluate where we are, where we need to improve.
And be willing to learn from others.
Absolutely. The book talks about this idea of the ego ceiling in apprenticeships.
Mm.
It's where the student consciously submits to the master, acknowledges their superior knowledge and skill.
It's about putting your ego aside to truly learn.
Exactly.
Now, the book also warns us about ego's tendency to breed paranoia.
Oh, yeah. Beware the disease of me.
What's that all about?
Well, when our ego is running the show, it can convince us that everyone is out to get us.
Oh, wow.
We become hyper-focused on perceived threats, slights, and we waste so much energy on that.
We create problems where there are none.
Exactly. And as the book says, he who indulges empty fears earns himself real fears.
It's a self-fulfilling prophecy.
100%.
The story of John DeLorean and his car company is a classic example of this.
Oh, DeLorean, he was a fascinating character.
So full of himself.
Right, he thought he was this visionary genius, and he couldn't stand any kind of oversight or criticism.
And that led to a lot of bad decisions.
Oh, yeah. His company was a total mess, chaotic, mismanaged.
And ultimately it crashed and burned.
And he ended up trying to save it through a drug deal, which is just, wow.
That's ego taking you to a very dark place.
Definitely. And you see this with leaders all the time.
They surround themselves with yes men.
Exactly. They create this echo chamber where their ego is constantly being stroked.
And they lose touch with reality.
Completely.
The book contrasts this with someone like General George C. Marshall.
Oh, true leader.
He always put the mission first,
He
right?
did. He was never concerned with personal ambition or recognition.
And he was incredibly effective.
100%.
Okay, so how do we escape this ego trap, this disease of me?
The book talks about gaining external perspective.
What's that all about?
It's about getting outside of our own heads, seeing the bigger picture.
Okay.
Like, think about visiting historical sites, reading biographies.
You're immersing yourself in different times, different cultures.
Exactly. And it reminds you that your problems, your struggles, they're not unique.
People have been dealing with similar challenges for centuries.
Right. It helps you put things in perspective.
And it can be really humbling.
It is.
The book uses Angela Merkel as an example of someone who embodies this kind of perspective.
Oh, she was amazing.
So calm, so focused on principles.
Right. She never let ego dictate her reactions.
Even when she was facing intense pressure.
She was a true leader.
And the book points out that a lot of truly successful people live pretty unassuming lives.
Yeah, it's a stark contrast to the flashy, ego-driven stuff we often see in the media.
Okay, so we've all experienced setbacks, right?
Part of life.
How does ego typically react to failure?
Oh, not well.
It takes it personally.
Totally. It sees failure as a personal attack, a threat to its self-image.
So it gets defensive, makes excuses.
Exactly. And that prevents us from learning from our mistakes.
The book contrasts this with truly strong individuals.
Although, yeah, they handle failure very differently.
They're able to take it in stride.
They are. They don't crumble under pressure. They don't get lost in self-doubt.
The book uses Katharine Graham as an example.
Oh, yeah, she was incredible.
She took over the Washington Post during a really turbulent time.
And she faced so much pressure, so much scrutiny.
But she never let ego get in the way of doing what was right.
And she led with this quiet strength, this unwavering commitment.
So the key is to not let our ego define us, even in the face of failure.
Absolutely.
It's about focusing on what we can control, learning from our mistakes, and moving forward.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
The book then delves into the importance of restraint.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
It uses the example of Jackie Robinson.
Oh, yeah, a true icon.
He faced incredible racism when he integrated Major League Baseball.
I can't even imagine the abuse he endured.
But he made a conscious decision to not retaliate.
Wow.
He knew that letting his anger, his ego, control him would undermine the whole mission.
That takes incredible strength.
It does, and
Yeah.
it's a powerful lesson for all of us.
So it's about picking our battles wisely, right?
Exactly. And recognizing that what truly degrades us is not how others treat us, but how we react to it.
Powerful stuff.
This leads us to the concept of defining our standards.
Okay, what's the takeaway here?
The book argues that true greatness comes from living by internal principles, not just chasing external achievements.
Makes sense.
It uses the example of Bill Belichick and the New England Patriots.
Oh, yeah, the dynasty.
They won all those Super Bowls, but they never got complacent.
They were always striving to improve.
Always. And it was about meeting their own high standards, not just winning for the sake of winning.
And that's the difference between ego-driven success and true greatness.
The book also talks about this idea of the indifferent spectator.
What's that?
It's like imagining this objective observer who's watching everything we do.
Okay.
And they're judging us based on our character, our integrity, not just our accomplishments.
It's like having your own internal ethics committee.
Exactly.
I like that.
Finally, the book ends by emphasizing the power of love and empathy.
Oh, that's a good one.
It talks about those Fight Club moments, those times when life punches us in the face and shatters our illusions.
They've all been there.
And it argues that the way we respond to those moments reveals a lot about our character.
So how does love and empathy help us navigate those tough times?
Well, the book contrasts it with hate and bitterness, which are often fueled by ego.
Right. Those emotions can be so destructive.
It uses the example of William Randolph Hearst.
Oh, yeah, the newspaper tycoon.
He was so obsessed with Orson Welles and Citizen Kane.
Why was that?
Well, he thought the film was based on his life, and he felt personally attacked.
So his ego was bruised.
Totally. And he spent years trying to destroy the film and Wells's career.
Wow.
And in the end, it just made him look petty and vindictive.
So it's about letting go of those grievances, right? Not letting them consume us.
Exactly. And that's a sign of strength, of a quiet ego.
The book also quotes Frederick Douglass. He said something like, "Those who inflict mistreatment are the ones being degraded, not the recipient."
That's a really powerful perspective.
It is. It takes the focus away from the ego and puts it on something bigger.
And it's about choosing love and empathy over hate.
Exactly. As Martin Luther King Jr. said, hate is a cancer that destroys the person who harbors it.
So these Fight Club moments, as painful as they are, can actually be opportunities for growth.
They can force us to confront our ego and choose a better path.
And ultimately, the book argues that true and lasting fulfillment comes not from building some grand monument to ourselves, but from the quiet, internal work of mastering our own minds.
So it's not about the external achievements, but about the internal transformation.
Exactly. And that's a journey we can all be on. So as you navigate your own endeavors, remember the insights we've explored today from Ego is the Enemy. Whether you're starting something new, riding a wave of success, or facing unexpected challenges, understanding the role of ego and learning to manage it can be a powerful tool in your life. Think about the examples that resonated with you today. Where might your own ego be subtly, or not so subtly, influencing your thoughts and actions? The journey of quieting the ego is a continuous one. It requires self-awareness, a commitment to learning, and the courage to prioritize purpose over pride. We hope this deep dive has given you some valuable food for thought. What stood out to you the most? We encourage you to revisit the ideas we discussed and consider how they apply to your own life. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We're always grateful for your curiosity and the insightful topics you suggest. Till next time, keep exploring and keep learning. And remember, the effort is often enough.
And remember to keep that ego in check.